In the first matchup, he fouled out with, I think, 4 minutes or some change left to go in that ball game. Can Carolina do that again? I think that's the biggest question. I think what helps you is with the emergence of Walker Kessler, you've now got 4 different guys you can throw at him to kind of match up with him. And I think Walker Kessler, who's 7'1" and a little bit lighter in terms of frame, he's more agile to step out on the perimeter and try to defend him at the three-point line as opposed to sending Garrison Brooks, Armando Bacot, or Day'Ron Sharpe. So are you confident that Carolina can slow him down? Because I think if Carolina takes him away like he did the first time, there's a pathway to Carolina getting a season sweep of Duke.
So taking him away doesn't mean that you have to do exactly what you did the first time. I would be very shocked if he comes out and plays as poorly as he did in that first game on the offensive end. I do think you're right about that with Kessler coming into his own. That creates a little bit of a different mismatch that wasn't there in the first game because Kessler is so much taller than him, but Hurt's a guy that battles on the glass too. So you got to be careful in that. The area that I think Carolina has to attack with him and where they're in a little bit of luck is Hurt does not play a disciplined game. He just fouled out in arguably their most important game of the season. We're recording this on Wednesday, so last night in the game against Georgia Tech, he fouled out in that game, and they eventually went to overtime. If he would have been able to keep himself in that game, they might have had a chance to win that game. But they didn't. So I think that's one of the more attackable areas with this team. And the other thing when it comes to this Duke team, that I've heard from some of the national people, some of the people that cover them a little bit closer than, of course, we do, because, frankly, we could give a rat's ass about them.
Yikes.
I mean, their guard play is not anything to write home about either, because what's their problem? Most of their guys are young, too. I mean, they got, when we talked with Brendan Marks earlier, he did mention Jordan Goldwire. Jordan Goldwire is a guy that, outside of course, last year's game against Carolina, is mostly a defensive presence. He's not going to give you much on the offensive end. The guys that normally give you a lot on the offensive end, they've struggled, just like Carolina's guards have. So that's where I think Carolina's got to be able to win some of those battles. I talked about in the first game, I think it's going to be important again in this game. Which team's point guard can step up and play better? Last year, that was the determining factor in the 2 games a year ago. It's the reason why Carolina lost both those games. The first game of this year, who was the best player on the court for Carolina? Who was the best player on the court for either team?
It was Caleb Love.
Caleb Love. So I feel like that's going to be the area that you have to keep an eye on. But you also, look, Kerwin Walton's got to have a better game than he's had in the last 2. He's got to be able to outperform some of the guys that are going to be shooting from the outside that at times for Duke have gotten hot. You go back, watch their game against Syracuse, you'd think this team is the next Warriors team in that first half. They were knocking down everything they were looking at. Since then, they've struggled a little bit. So those are the types of things. Both of these teams are going through similar struggles. Carolina's, there's another aspect that I know we'll talk about here, but these 2 teams are very similar on paper, again, coming into this game. Similar to the first matchup, there's just some different things that are tweaked, like you talked about, with Kessler being added for Carolina and Duke losing Jalen Johnson, thinning their roster a little bit. But what does that do? Carolina is always usually the deeper team, so it's a little bit normal for them to have, an extra guy in there. And for Duke, they're usually a team that likes to run a much tighter lineup, much tighter rotation, and they've gotten a little bit tighter since they've lost Jalen Johnson, so maybe that's more comfortable for them. You don't know until you get in game.
You brought up the point guard play, and as I mentioned when we broke down the first matchup, that will always, in my opinion, be the determining factor whoever wins these games for probably the remainder of the time that these games are played, because the Duke-Carolina rivalry is a prelude to what you're going to see if you make the NCAA tournament. You don't win high-level basketball games anymore with subpar guard play.
And I think it was part of the rivalries beforehand, but it wasn't as noticeable as it's been the last 2 years. The last 2 years, it's been very, very noticeable that's why you won or lost the game.
Carolina, before Kobe White was winning with experienced guards. Duke was able to beat you with inexperienced guards. So Carolina's proven they can do it, and they did it earlier this year with Caleb Love. But the game of basketball has evolved as this rivalry has evolved, where when Roy got here, you could beat Duke pounding the ball inside and not shooting or making any threes. You've got to make some threes now. To win these types of games. That's just the way the game is being played, and it will be played this way for a very, very long time. Carolina is capable of hitting threes. They showed that in the first matchup. They went 10 of 15 from behind the three-point line. Kerwin Walton was 4 of 4. Caleb Love was 4 of 5. I'm not saying Carolina's got to go 10 of 15 and shoot 67% from behind the three-point line because you're asking too much in that department, but you need Caleb Love to give you 1 or 2 made threes. You need Caleb Love to give you 1 or 2 made threes. R.J. Davis has come off the bench.
So he's got to give you 4 because you just repeated Caleb Love.
Right, exactly. You just need something from these guys behind the perimeter. Carolina is going to beat Duke up inside because they've beaten every team up inside all year long.
Yep.
And they've beaten Duke up on the interior for the last, really since Sheldon Williams departed in 2006. Carolina has owned the interior part of this rivalry.
That's a throwback. As a Knick fan, too, that's a throwback.
And you go back to the first match of Carolina rebounded Duke 38-31, including 14 on the offensive rebounds. So Carolina is going to handle that aspect of the game. We have no worries about Carolina being able to out-rebound Duke. The worry is, can Carolina I'm not even necessarily outshoot Duke, but can they just shoot? And can they contain Duke's freshman guards, which are capable, like Carolina's guards, are getting hot from three? The other night, they completely just left Syracuse's best shooter open a handful of times. And everyone was was complaining about coaching and stuff like that. You can't help the fact that Andrew Platex tried to slip down 3 times to cause a double team that wasn't there and left a wide open guy for 3.
Again, there's and I've said this so many times over the last 2 years that it just makes me want to put my head through a damn wall. I don't understand how people don't realize that there's no way the coaches are telling them not to go underneath screens, to leave guys open, to stay, when you hedge over, to, wait until pretty much the last second to try to close out, leaving guys open. There's no way that's how it's being taught. It's just not being executed the way that it should be. In practice, you can, if a guy doesn't react the way you want him to, you can blow the whistle, stop it right there, coach him, tell him what's going on. In game, if they can't do it, there's nothing you can do until you get them to the sideline. And you can say, what were you doing out there? You were lost. So that's the thing that I think people have to understand when it comes to why was Buddy Boeheim so open, why were, some of the shooters in the game against Iowa earlier this season so open. It's just guys weren't executing what they've been taught to do when it comes to the defensive scheme. And you can criticize that all you want. It really isn't going to change. I mean, that's something Roy's done for years. He's going to continue to stick with that. He may make some minor adjustments, but it's not going to have a full turnaround and all of a sudden this team's going to come out and play zone or something primarily. That's just not going to happen. I think 7 to 8 threes would kind of be the area that I would look at. And again, they don't have to be as efficient as they were in that first game. I think it's more about how many do you make more than what percentage do you shoot. The other thing is you don't want to see them taking too many outside shots. We saw that early in the game against Florida State in the first half when they were struggling, where they were just taking a ton of shots from outside the arc. Put the ball inside. Run your offense through your big men. But like you said, you need, when those opportunities are there from the outside, you need to knock them down. And somebody besides Kerwin Walton has to knock down shots. It's the main thing. There is so much pressure on him. He has been criticized so heavily over these last couple of games because he hasn't made shots. And it's really, you have to look at the other guys too and say, is there anybody here that can help him out? Because in that first game of the year, you had some guys that normally haven't had good shooting nights. Leaky Black hit a couple of shots from the outside in that game. He had a couple of mid-range shots too. You need to have that guy show up in this game as well. You need Andrew Platek to maybe get a couple of threes to go down for him. R.J. Davis to find his range as well. all those guys, I mean, you need at least, a couple of them can still have, their struggles, but you need 2, maybe even 3 guys around Kerwin Walton that when they're open, they can knock down the shots that they have. That's your biggest concern. My biggest concern is turnovers. This team has 60 turnovers in the last 3 games, including 20 in 2 of the last 3. They've got, they have 20 in all 3 of them.
Well, that's what the average would be, yeah.
Yeah. How do you expect to win games if you're turning the ball over 20 times a game?
You don't.
That just doesn't happen. I mean, look, I don't think people understand 20 is way above anybody's normal average. Most teams average about 12 to 13.
Well, my thing with the turnovers is this. Now, granted, 20 is a lot anyway. If Carolina was playing at the tempo that they usually play at, it would probably balance itself out. Roy Williams' teams will turn the ball over a lot, but when they're getting 90 to 100 possessions of games, you don't really think about them. You're not getting those possessions. You're playing more 75 to 80 possessions. So those turnovers, they mean a lot more. And so I think that's the thing, is that if Carolina was playing at a higher pace, you'd live with it because you're still going to get more shots, more offensive rebounds, which is Carolina's best offense. You're not getting that. And I thought Brendan Marks said it best. How do you expect to score the ball if you can't even shoot the ball? And that's been Carolina's problem all year long, is that they can't even shoot the ball half the time without throwing the damn thing away.
Yeah.
And you go back to the first matchup, they turned it over 16 times. But on the flip side, they forced 15 of them. I think that's also been lost with this team, is that not only are they turning it over a bunch, they haven't consistently turned the opposition over a lot. You were able to turn Duke over a lot in the first matchup, so your turnovers kind of balance itself out. So if you're going to turn the ball over a lot, that's not okay, but you'll live with it. As long as you're on the other end, you're going to force some turnovers of your own.
Well, the other thing about it is in some of the games where they've turned it over a lot, they have forced turnovers. But when you are turning the ball over 18, 20 times a game, that margin is still going to be big. You could turn the other team over 12 times. That wouldn't necessarily be a bad night. It'd be about an average night. But if you're turning the ball over on your end 19 times, you're not going to win that game. Yeah. It's just that simple. So you've got to help yourself out. And, Brendan Marks, he mentioned in that interview that we did with him just a little while ago, he said that, he's doing what most people are doing. The guards have to be better with the ball. The guards have to take care of the ball. I understand that. The big men also have to be smarter with some of their passes. I think those are probably the most frustrating turnovers. Because,
especially when your high-low game that's a integral part of Carolina's offense.
The other problem is that I've noticed the ones that I get the most frustrated with, and it happens about 3 or 4 times a game, they'll be in good position and force a pass that ends up being a turnover when they could have had a basket. Now, look, sometimes maybe you wouldn't finish at the basket, but you're still passing up a really, really good opportunity to force it into a double team and turn it over. Right. Just take what is there for you, because I understand, look, you're trying to be unselfish, you pass up a good shot for a great shot, all that, coaching BS, whatever. But at the same time, when you have those opportunities, especially the big guys inside, their high percentage looks, take the shots, take them. Please don't pass those opportunities up for an outside shot that's going to be a risk anyways, and you're going to turn it over. That's where I'm somewhat frustrated, and that's one of the areas where they've really got to cut down on the turnovers, is the big men inside.
Another part of that's going to be different this time around. There's going to be fans in the Smith Center. There weren't fans in Cameron Indoor Stadium. And I'll be honest, Carolina doesn't win that game in Cameron if there was fans. Duke made too many runs in that game where if that building was able to get going, this team would have collapsed.
Oh, in a normal year, yeah. Exactly. I mean, look, again, it's going to be a 15% capacity crowd at Carolina. And look, I was joking earlier, still 15% inside of Cameron would be very small. I know that that's a small gym. So maybe, with the way that it's built, the amount of fans that would have been let in could make it loud. That would be like watching a high school basketball game for a team that's kind of average. Like I'm trying to do the math quickly in my head. I think there would be less than 1,000 fans in the building.
Yeah, probably, but
or a little over 1,000 fans. So
the big thing
not great.
is that that benefits Carolina. Most years